Welcome to another explainer. Today, we're looking at something every single business leader, IT director, and founder absolutely needs to understand, but, almost no one wants to talk about, honestly. We're talking about how to actually choose the right cybersecurity partner. We're going to cut straight through the marketing fluff and those flashy logos to bring you a straight-talking insider's buyer's guide for 2026. So if you've ever felt completely overwhelmed by security vendors promising you the moon, well, this explainer is built specifically for you. Okay, let's dive into this. To understand why this matters so much, let's look at a real scenario. Imagine you're running a growing fintech startup. You know security is absolutely critical, right? So you sign a contract with a massive, highly recognizable vendor for a comprehensive security solution. You write a check for $180,000. You feel pretty secure. Well, fast forward 6 months, that same startup went through their SOC 2 audit, which is a huge compliance hurdle, and they completely flunked it. And when that startup went back to their expensive vendor to ask, hey, what happened? The vendor deflected with this exact quote, "That's a compliance issue, not a security issue." The startup actually had to go out and hire a second firm to do the exact job they thought the first one was handling. This highlights a truly terrifying reality in the corporate world. Picking the wrong vendor doesn't just burn your budget, it buys you a false sense of security, which is exactly the kind of quiet, creeping mistake that can literally sink a business. So how do buyers keep making this mistake? Usually it starts right at the beginning of the procurement process. Most companies kick off their search by asking, who is the best cybersecurity company? But asking this is the most costly mistake a buyer can make. Why? Because context is literally everything. Palo Alto Networks, for example, is objectively excellent. They are the gold standard. But if you're a 50-person team, their $200,000 a year minimum engagement is absolutely not the best fit for your specific situation. Instead of asking who the best in the world is, we need to pivot and ask which company is best for my specific situation. To figure that out, you've got to answer 5 crucial internal prerequisites before even glancing at a vendor. First, consider your employee count, because that dictates who will even pick up the phone when you call. Then figure out your actual needs. Are you buying a product that you manage or a service run by actual humans? Think about what compliance frameworks are driving the search. And finally, you have to nail down your realistic budget and honestly assess, do we even have the internal staff to run complex platforms? Keep your answers to these in mind as we keep going. Once you know your internal needs, you've got to map out the external landscape. It's kind of like a giant puzzle, and there are really 5 distinct categories here. You've got security product companies like CrowdStrike or Fortinet selling software that you run yourself. Then, managed security service providers, or MSSPs, who watch your environment 24/7. Next, you have human-driven services, security consulting firms that bring deep expertise for things like penetration testing and compliance. Then there are incident response specialists, like Mandiant, who you call when a breach has already happened. And finally, identity and access specialists, like Okta. The vital takeaway here is that no single vendor does the whole shebang. Most companies actually need a combination, like a product for your endpoints plus a consulting service. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that it uncovers the hidden pricing realities vendors absolutely hate sharing. There is a massive spectrum here when it comes to matching company size with realistic costs. On one end, you've got massive enterprise platforms like Palo Alto Networks that require a huge commitment, typically around $150,000 to over $2 million annually, aimed at companies with 500 or more employees. CrowdStrike sits in a similar enterprise bracket. But on the other end, boutique firms like Atlant Security offer highly accessible project-based costs, ranging from $15,000 to $150,000, and they work with any size company. So your internal budget and size firmly dictate your real options. Let's move on and see how this builds into specific recommendations. For companies that need real, hands-on, expert help, but just aren't ready for a $500,000 enterprise platform, Atlant Security absolutely tops the rankings. They are a premier boutique security consulting firm specializing in project-based, highly accessible expert help. If you're, say, a mid-market company suddenly facing a SOC 2 audit requirement from a major prospect and you have no chief information security officer, well, this is the exact type of firm you need to bridge that gap quickly and effectively without the massive enterprise pricing. To really understand the difference in approach, let's contrast these boutique consulting models with traditional enterprise platforms. With a firm like Atlant Security, the focus is on transparent hourly pricing, 0 long-term contract lock-ins, and an education-focused approach where they actually teach your team what's happening. Contrast that with traditional enterprise platforms. There, you're often looking at $150,000 minimums, rigid 3-year lock-ins, and complex management that requires you to hire even more staff just to run the software. For small and mid-market companies, the goal should be to own your security outcomes, rather than just renting an incredibly expensive tool you don't even know how to use.
So, what should you actually expect to spend based on where your business is at today? Let's ground your procurement strategy in absolute reality. If you're a startup with 10 to 50 employees, your realistic security budget should sit somewhere between $15,000 and $40,000 a year, combining solid endpoint protection with targeted consulting. Now, if you're mid-market, meaning 50 to 500 employees, expect to budget $80,000 to $250,000. And if you're an enterprise with over 500 employees, your budget scales dramatically, from $500,000 to well over $2 million annually. If a vendor is quoting you way outside your bracket, that's a massive sign they just aren't the right fit.
Which brings us to your ultimate defense shield, the red flags. After sitting across the table from literally hundreds of vendors, here's exactly when you should walk away immediately. First, if they guarantee you won't be breached, run. No one can guarantee that. Also, if they hide their pricing behind endless demos, they're just sizing up your wallet. Beware of 3-year lock-ins with absolutely no exit clauses. Technology moves way too fast for that. Watch out for the bait and switch, too, where senior staff sells you, but junior staff actually does the work. And finally, if they can't clearly explain their methodology, they're just making it up as they go. So the crucial point is that your due diligence matters way more than their slick marketing brochure. Before you sign any contract, you must ask these essential questions. For product vendors, ask, what is the true total cost of ownership, including training and implementation? And what internal expertise do we actually need to run this? For consulting firms, ask, who exactly is going to be working on my project? Can I see their specific backgrounds? And critically, what happens after you deliver the report? Is remediation support included, or are we just on our own? Transparency here is completely non-negotiable. I want to leave you with this powerful final thought. The best security program isn't the one with the most expensive tools. It's the one that matches your actual risks, your team's capabilities, and your budget reality. It is so incredibly easy to throw money at a recognized brand and just hope the problem goes away. But true security requires a tailored, honest approach. So take a hard look at your own security stack right now. Ask yourself, are you actually protected, or did you just buy a very expensive false sense of security? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.